are simply divine. You are both human and divine. We are all of and from the same divine source. Are you ready to ignite the divine spark within you? Are you ready to become the fullest expression of the radiant love light being you truly are? Are you ready to lighten up?
Introducing your co-host Suzanne Ross and myself, Matthias Imhotep, your global transformers leading you into the Golden Age. Welcome to the Lighten Up radio show dedicated to the awakening and ascension of humanity. It's time to lighten up.
Hello and welcome to Lighten Up. I'm so delighted that you're joining us. I am Suzanne Ross and I'm here with my co-host, Matthias Imhotep. Welcome, Matthew.
Greetings to you and everyone. Pleased to be here.
We have such an intriguing show for you this evening. It's all about the Egyptian mystery schools, numerology, and hidden wisdom. We're going to talk a lot about the significance of the upcoming month of November. And it's really an auspicious time for the ascension. Matthias has been teaching me all about how the numbers reveal this divine wisdom and why it's so important for us in our lives today, and particularly for the ascension. And Matthias has been studying this material for 30 years. He's written 3 phenomenal books about it, and I'm so delighted to be discussing it today because we are coming right into that month of November.
We sure are, and this is also going to pick up on some of the things that we discussed last time. Yes, it is truly the avenue to ascension. We will follow in with the Golden Age Oracle as well.
Yes, we will. We have Magen Martinez, who is the Golden Age Oracle, and she has really fascinating insights about the ascension, about what's happening right now energetically. She is a psychic medium, and you'll want to stay tuned for her profound revelations.
Indeed, and so a way to begin with the progression of these activating dates is to talk about the cusps over the last 6 months that have brought us activations, celestial events, all leading up to the big event horizon. There has been many celestial alignments and activations that have been gearing us up and leading us to this event horizon. For example, the eclipses, the equinoxes, solstices, and other cusp dates where we have had energy that has been lifting and shifting. One that comes to mind is 8/8, the Lion's Gate, which did happen on the 8th of the month, but it was something that catapulted and crescendoed up until the 22nd. And actually the Golden Age Oracle was saying, and the Elohim through her, they were saying that each cusp was going to be a significant lifting and shifting energetically. And so we've certainly seen that in a variety of ways.
Sounds like these celestial alignments are really like thresholds or gates. And when we go through them, particularly, using the zodiac wheel, it feels like we move into another phase of our journey.
Absolutely. A lot of people have been experiencing the ascension symptoms and wondering what that's about. The quickening of energy can cause anxiety, a feeling of like you need to crawl out of your skin, and so that can be brought on by these activations as well.
So each of these gates is actually causing an activation in each of us, a raising of our vibrational frequency?
Absolutely, yes. And it's also very interesting to take a look at the fact that November 1st as we are coming up into the Halloween season now. It is the 16th today. There's a thinning of the veil that occurs from the 31st to the 1st. And recognize that in Egypt, it is 111, November 1st, when it's the 31st here. And so it's customary for them to communicate with the dead because of this thinning of the veil. And that really starts the month of November for transformation and activation.
Yes, and so here in America, we celebrate Halloween on the 31st. And I was actually curious about that and looked up the meaning of hallow, and it actually means to worship or honor. So that's really interesting that at that time it would also be November 1st in Egypt, and they have a holiday that is actually strategically placed at the time of the thinning of the veils. So communication between the interdimensional realms is enhanced. We can actually reach out and speak to our higher guides. They can communicate to us and through us. So it's really fascinating that that is the first day of the month of November that's really all about the thinning of the veil.
Indeed, and what happened for me so many years ago on November 1st, I had this crazy dream where this voice was telling me that it's all going to begin. And it's going to last for so long and then so much longer. And I was awoken from the dream by an alarm clock. And I don't set alarm clocks. You know, I like to just kind of wake up when my body wakes me up. And a lot of times I'm up late at night working on material. So this time I'm like, where is this sound coming from? And I wander off into the kitchen, and there was an alarm clock that had been set. And it was going off at 111. And so it woke me up with the voice said, it all begins now. And that was incredible because the synchronicity increases with every November. This happened to me for 7 years, where this, sure enough, like clockwork, on the 1st, synchronicity began to increase. And by the 11th, 11/11, that was the halfway point. And then it was 11 more days until the 22nd. And on the 22nd, I found myself in the Great Pyramid. You know, a whole nother story, but really it was about the ascension on this Golden Gate.
Yes, and in the last radio show, we were talking about the significance of the numbers 11, 22, and 33. So then there's some really auspicious dates throughout the month of November. So we talked about 11/1, the thinning of the veils, and the next date is 11/7.
Yes, it is, and that is also an Egyptian holiday in essence, an ancient one where Upper and Lower Egypt was brought together. And you had these twin brothers that were battling. The one that killed Osiris, who's called Set, and the brother Horus, right? And so they essentially make up, and Upper and Lower Egypt is united. And this is a very auspicious thing because it has a correlation to the mind and the heart. And so it's bringing all these energies together in an all-chemical process, which is also echoed in the Gnostic scriptures, where it says when you make the two become one, the inside like the outside, the above like the below, and it goes on to say, when you've done this, then you enter the kingdom of heaven.
I like how earlier you were telling me that as above, so below can be expanded into as within, so without. So it sounds like that's really synonymous with what happened in Egypt, with Upper and Lower Egypt uniting, mind and heart uniting. And then another really fascinating thing that you were telling me about Set and Osiris is that when Set actually cut Osiris up into 14 pieces, it was actually symbolizing how this knowledge that Osiris had was actually split into 14 temples spread throughout Egypt.
Right, 7 along the Nile. The Atlantis wisdom was somewhat abused, and so they wanted you to earn it and to go through the initiation process in order to attain this wisdom.
And there's so much symbology around uniting the mind and the heart, and we can actually connect in that the mind is masculine, the heart is feminine, and also spirit and matter. So, and the numbers are actually 7 and 8.
Yes, they are, in the sense that left and right respectively add up to 7 and 8. Brain adds up to 8. Heart adds up to 7. The other thing that I just realized it's important to talk about in these symbols is all across the planet, there's these ancient cultures that have these twin brothers, as we've referenced in a few different cases. But it's really cool to realize that it has a lot to do with, like, the dragon and the phoenix in China. It has to do with Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, which is a blend. The serpent feathered being is a blend of a serpent and a bird. And in the Native American tradition, it's the eagle and the snake. And so these are the principles of the male and the female, the mind and the heart. And to synergize all that together, which the Egyptians also express in this being called Nupti, which is the head of Set and the head of Horus coming out of one being and looking in opposite directions. This symbol is also really key in showing up in the zodiac too, because you have the centaur that teaches Asclepius as the keeper of the gate, which also represents a double-headed creature looking in both directions. So you have these symbols that show up over and over again that demonstrate the path.
Yes, and so in that symbology, would you be saying then that the eagle represents the mind and the serpent represents the heart?
Yeah, the male and the female energy. I mean, obviously the serpent is going to encompass more chakras and energy, because you're talking about Kundalini rising, you're talking about the serpent in Egypt is a symbol of the goddess, and so it's primarily the mind and the heart, but it's not to relegate it to any one particular center.
I see. And so if the serpent is representative of the goddess, is that also then the life force energy,
creative
and
force,
the Kundalini
yep.
being activated at the base of the spine, heading up to the heart, where then the eagle can soar with this wisdom and knowledge?
Yeah, so the eagle is divine intelligence. It's the mental, it's air. In fact, Quetzalcoatl is considered to be the god of both air and water, and so water would be the emotions, air is the mental. Yeah.
And so then we have November 7th and November 8th. So we're saying that those 2 days are really significant for uniting the male and female and the polarized energies. The two become one.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's in alignment also with the Great Pyramid, pointing to the Golden Gate, that this has been part of the mythology of ascension for so long, and it's been lost and forgotten that these are the basic symbols and understanding that enables us to attain these great heights. And so the zodiac has always been a story in picture form. Another name for that is a isosepia, which is a bit like gematria. It's hidden information in a picture that when you look through the right lens, all this information pours out. We also talked last time about Orpheus, the serpent bearer, and the keeper of the Golden Gate. And so again, we have this serpent energy, the wisdom of ascension, again being tamed. He's got a handle on it. And once you blend all these things together and become unified, then you can ascend your consciousness.
So fascinating. So we're actually having like this serpent ascending in this ascension month as we move through these particular auspicious days. So we thought it would be fun to take us on a journey, starting with the 1st and then recognizing that the 7th and the 8th are uniting male and female. And then we moved into 9, which really represents completion.
Wholeness, yes. Both male and female. Exactly.
So wholeness once we are united as one. And so then we move into November 10th, success.
Accomplishment, yep. And then you really have begun to master your abilities for the 11th. The 11-11, that's all about self-mastery. Mastering, of course, the heart and the healing, because 22, again, is more about the master architect and the master science logic aspect.
It sounds like really the whole 11th month could be self-mastery towards ascension.
Absolutely. Well, don't forget that one of the Egyptian symbols that represents the Golden Gate is the scarab. And the scarab was used Also in the 18th dynasty, you may remember seeing it in the King Tut's cartouche, and it actually is a symbol of the 18th dynasty, and it means the transformation of the soul. So they understood this stuff.
I love that symbol, and how interesting that it's all about the transformation of the soul, because that scarab beetle shows up a lot in Egyptian symbology.
Mm-hmm.
So then we move into 1112. So is there some significance around the number 12 that you can share with us?
Well, I think that you can look at each day and have a correlation to the major arcana of the tarot.
Yes.
And it's really easy to even look at the destiny cards and make sense of any playing card. You just look at the number, think about numerology. So if you look at the 3 of clubs, 3s are about joy, creative expression, celebration. So you can start with an underlying understanding of the information this way, and then you look at the other aspect of the suit, which is clubs. So that makes it a mental expression of the 3. And I say that because, 12 is a higher expression. 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay? Mm-hmm. So you can actually make sense of all this stuff by breaking it down to its smallest element.
Okay, so as we get into the double digits, that really signifies higher expressions of
Absolutely.
The total of those two numbers added together.
Mm-hmm. And so 12 is a correlation to the hangman. Then each one of the teen numbers that evolves and expands along this path, the next one would be 13, and that's the death card, but that's really about transformation. And so each one of these days sort of represents an initiation, along the Nile and ascending the consciousness around this esoteric wisdom.
Oh, ascension along the Nile. I like that. And along the way, you're going to these different temples to receive higher wisdom and knowledge so that you can transform the soul.
Mm-hmm. And if you follow the journey of those major arcana, you'll see this. Then you've kind of, by the 14, which is 2 7s, there's a lot that can be said about that. The mastery, she's an androgynous being, and she's mixing these two elements together, the male and the female. This is a card that really speaks about self-mastery. And so once you've attained some mastery, now you get to try out your skill set a little bit. And of course we have other cards depicting other things like the devil. 15 is all about detachment, putting things into perspective. The church wants us to believe in the devil, but they've really been cutting us off from our sexuality and demonizing the feminine and sexuality. So the devil simply represents these things being out of balance. Too material or too much in your head. 15 is also the number that's associated with the Merkaba, which is all about balancing the opposites. And so the next card that happens is the Tower, and there's some chaos and things are shaken up. You've got some challenges and some troubles to overcome. They're like tests, okay? How are you going to handle this? And along this journey, a lot of what you need to understand is it's ever the more so surrender, let go, detach, step back. In these final steps, it's really about rising to the occasion of using your mastery. And obviously one part of that is mastering the emotional body. That's really important, because so many people, they don't take that breath and they decide how they're going to speak or react to something that's triggered them.
Mm-hmm. And so you talked about 16 being the Tower, and we're really breaking down structures and systems. So it's so fascinating how then we would move into 17 as the card of the Star, and that's all about renewal.
It is indeed. Again, after surrendering and after things falling apart, you have to fall back into your trust and your faith. And then, yes, the sun and the stars start to shine and the renewal happens, and you, because you've surrendered, you gain more gifts, you gain more access.
And you develop that higher wisdom and knowledge continually throughout the process.
Yeah, and each day, if you follow it, there's a correlation. It's pretty interesting. These synchronicities, activations, and alignments have been happening for years. Many of you have been noticing and paying attention more and more, as these are indeed the sign of the times. many ancient scriptures told us to watch for them. And the clues to understanding it really were astronomy, astrology, tarot, numerology, playing card, these divination systems that were given to us by Uriel, who passed them on to Enoch, God's scribe. So the understanding of numbers as energy and the correlating numbers, signs, and symbols from the major arcana as the steps 1 through 22, or the days along this path to ascension, become ever the more so clear. It has been increasing and recurring each year for several years now. For me, it's been over 20. Ever the more so with the frequency and DNA activation stepping up as the steps to the stairway of heaven. It's pretty exciting when you think of it and begin to understand all this was understood and laid out for us. And so, moving right along, onward and upward.
18, which is the moon, which typically symbolizes illusion.
Precisely. And so, again, it's testing you to really pay attention, and to tune in, use your intuition.
And then we move into 19, which is the sun.
More light is shining.
And I also understand that 19 is about revealing everything. So some profound revelations on the 19th?
Indeed, it's also a 1. 1 plus 9 obviously brings you to a 10. So 1 is about new beginnings. So things are being revealed. You're starting a new cycle. You're applying what you learned. Yeah.
Illuminating revelations. I like that for the sun. And then we move into 20. Only 2 days away from the Golden Gate.
Well, that's an interesting one, too, because that's the judgment card. And that's, again, about reflection and, well, it really speaks of a rite of passage. And that there's a culmination of things and, you really are headed towards the Golden Gate. You're applying everything you've learned and you didn't spiral out into judgment. You've passed all your tests and you proceed to the next day.
Yes, and it sounds like
On the 21st,
according to the cards, that it's also a validation for those big ideas.
From there,
And you're
online and ready to go.
It sounds to me like you're becoming the eternal child, because we are eternal. And so at the time of the Golden Gate, we have the opportunity to return to the eternal I am that we truly are, reconnecting with our whole soul.
That's so interesting because, the way of the Eternals is echoed in the Egyptian story. The Sphinx, the name for it, Sheshep-Ankh, means the image of the Eternals. And so it truly is the path of the Eternals laid out in the esoteric hidden wisdom. Now don't forget those destiny cards. You want to explore that online too, and maybe we'll get into that another time. But the whole thing is this divine source code that was laid out for us to be able to have the knowledge to be master of your dominion, master of your domain, and understand the cycles and the seasons and the rhythm of everything.
And this hidden knowledge is being revealed right now on our show at this time. So it is no longer hidden. The Gnosis unveiled. I love it, Matthew. And all of this secret knowledge getting revealed at this time is so auspicious for the ascension. I feel it's really necessary for the ascension.
It truly is. I've been planning to do awareness education for a long time because the information really speaks for itself. And you resonate with stuff when it's the truth. You can feel it. And so, the tools are there. Granted, they have been somewhat suppressed by secret societies and the church who, understood things. They found manuscripts and they were like, oh my God, we need to learn about this and become empowered and keep it from the people. So, the unveiling of all this information shows up. Like, for example, those 4 living creatures, if you look at some of the church crosses, they want to say it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John on the four corners of the cross. No, it's often pictured the symbol representing the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man. So there was a correlation to the astrological information, the zodiac, all this hidden wisdom that they knew about. And so now you do too.
And you'll be joining us on this journey into eternity as we move toward the portal of ascension. How exciting. Okay, everybody fasten your seatbelts. It's time for our special guest. And we're so delighted to bring you Brad Olsen, an accomplished author who's written many books about sacred places around the world, and most recently his esoteric series, starting with modern esoteric and now future esoteric. Matthew, are you familiar with the material in future esoteric?
Well, I did just get a book from the Gentle Giant at the last event, so I haven't had a chance to review it completely, but leafing through it, it looks like it highlights some of the most incredible esoteric wisdom. So I'm really excited to delve more deeply into it.
Yes, and so let's welcome Brad Olsen.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's good to be here.
Brad has written so many remarkable books, and these are only two examples. He's written many books about sacred places around the world, and they're really phenomenal. He features not only the spiritual belief systems around all of these places that he's going, but also searches for the deeper meaning and purpose behind these temple sites. Then Brad started writing the esoteric series, starting with modern esoteric, and now future esoteric, and your third esoteric book is coming out soon.
It's called Beyond Esoteric, The Ultimate Journey, and I never repeat my material, so I'm finding new material that no 19th century esotericist could have ever imagined the human race would be confronted with. So it's even a continuation upon future esoteric into some realms that are very unique to this age we live in.
I really look forward to that. It sounds so fascinating. I love exploring other realms, especially at this most auspicious time on the planet.
Very auspicious. And the nature of the word esoteric means it's information that's usually sought out or contained by a select few people. So you really have to want to know these subjects. And it's kind of along the line of what the word occult means, which just means hidden. And a lot of these subjects are hidden in plain sight, and you really have to seek them out because we're not getting this information via the mass media, the government, or our educational system. So there is a layer above and beyond what we're being told, and these are the subjects that I find so fascinating.
It's interesting, when I opened your book, Sacred Places, one of the first chapters that I came upon, you were talking about the Great Wall of China and dragons, and how we've been led to believe that dragons and serpents are scary and evil, and in effect, it's really been intentional so that we don't awaken the truth within us, that they really are sacred, and that the Great Wall of China was actually a long stone serpent.
Right. And the Chinese always believe that they live on the spine of the serpent, and the Great Wall is just an emanation of the tail and the spine of the serpent, cutting through what they've always called themselves the Middle Kingdom, because they've always known that there's kingdoms all around, but they've always thought of themselves right there in the middle.
Interesting. And so you were telling me earlier that writing the books about the sacred places really led to your esoteric series. Can you tell me how that transition took place?
Sure. So I basically started as a travel writer, as a journalist, and I've been on dozens of press trips and spent years, literally years overseas, living abroad and traveling abroad. And finding myself magnetically attracted to these places. Every time I take a trip, I always try to find a new one and check it out, talk to the locals, get the background information, as you said, the traditional aspects of these sites, and try to combine them all, as well as sometimes the paranormal aspects. And a lot of these sacred places also have UFO sightings frequently, around them, sometimes even Bigfoot or cryptozoology type creatures that are associated with these sites. So it occurred to me that there's just so much more information that I could put into one book on 108 sites, that I could only give treatment to about 3 or 4 pages, where a place like the Great Pyramid could easily be a whole chapter or a whole book. So those esoteric traditions that were related to some of these sites then went into modern esoteric. And that's basically the story from the beginning, including the mystery schools of old and the secret societies more in this modern age, up to the present time. And then future esoteric takes a forward-looking stance, and that's when I get into the secret state to understand how all this has been bottled up, and then the cosmos section about all things ET. Finishing up with the utopia section, which are solutions for humanity and ways that we can use what we know up till now to go into the future and make this world a better place.
Egypt being really the original Golden Age of Enlightenment, the mystery school teachings from those times seem really applicable now.
Yeah. A lot of times this information never goes out of style. It's just we're not being prompted by the basic institutions in this country and around the world to learn about these things. For example, I have a chapter in the Utopia section of Future Esoteric about superhuman abilities. Wouldn't it be great if when we went to primary school we were learning how to become telepathic or clairvoyant or become astral travelers? We weren't, and that's why these subjects have been bottled up in the realm of the esoteric for so long. But they don't go away, and of course we still have these innate abilities to learn and utilize them if only we were properly trained to do so.
We were both just at a conference last weekend, and Mary Rodwell was presenting about how schools just like that are now being formed. And with only a few weeks under their belt, these kids were reading with their blindfolds on. They were clearly seeing what was in front of them, pictures, text, one of the abilities that they had developed in only weeks' time.
That's amazing, and that's the way it should be. And can you imagine how far these children can go into their adult lives, building upon these skills that I claim are innate within all of us if we just learn how to bring them out?
Yes, I saw a chapter in Future Esoteric called Superhuman Capabilities.
Yeah.
Going back to modern esoteric, I'm just so fascinated about how Egypt, in their golden age, how we can learn from them to enter our own new golden age. So can you tell me from modern esoteric what you share about that?
Well, first of all, that it's on very key ley line points in the continent. It's such a important juncture that whoever knew where to build the Great Pyramids knew that the Earth was spherical, knew that there were several continents, and indeed the exact location, latitude and longitude, is the dead center of all the land masses on this planet. So it's coming into just the building process already having a very universal understanding about this location. It's also been proven that underneath the Great Pyramid is a labyrinth of chambers and passageways and levels containing many artifacts that have to be suppressed according to the Egyptian authorities, because what they would reveal is our ET heritage and a long line of very high-tech instruments, including the Akashic records, which could then access us to everything in our past. And then there would be no conspiracy theories anymore. We would know exactly what happened in all these cases. And there's also supposed to be a giant UFO in one chamber. And there was actually an Egyptologist who let it slip one time that at a press conference and said that there was this craft down there and they have no idea how they got it in there, but it's down there. So there's so many things. I mean, we could do the whole talk today about the Great Pyramids and how it came from Atlantean technology and the culture that began in Egypt after the fall of Atlantis was the Osirian Empire, and much of the technology came with the priests from the sunken continent to the fertile valley of the Nile. And because of its very important ley lines, this particular site around Cairo was chosen as the capital.
And not just the ley lines, I understand from Robert Bobal's work that the 3 pyramids of Giza were also directly aligned with the 3 belt stars of Orion,
right,
10,500 years ago.
Right. And because of the precession of the equinoxes, it's quite a little bit off kilter, just in the same way that the Sphinx, which is this big lion creature with a human head, is facing towards the Leo constellation. But because of the precession of the equinox, it's off a few degrees. He doesn't quite look at that constellation anymore. And that's how we're able to date these monuments into the tens of thousands of years old, not a few thousand years old, as Egyptologists would tell you.
Yes, absolutely. From Drunvalo Melchizedek's work, I found it so fascinating. Of course, he goes into the fall of Atlantis and then the buildup of Egypt in the land of Chem, and how at that time the pyramids were activated. Also, he talks about this spaceship that landed on top of the Great Pyramid, and they were taking these Nikal Mystery School initiates to 3 different sites on the planet, and one being the Mayan, and one being Egyptian, and one being in the Himalayas. And when they got back to Egypt, and this was going to be, you know, the progenitors of a new golden age here in Egypt, that spaceship went underground.
That's
under
how
the
they got
pyramid.
it down there. Ah, okay.
So just, you know, affirming what you were saying from some of Melchizedek's work around
Excellent.
that. And then this, our Golden Age Oracle, Magen Martinez, on our last radio show was talking about how our planet may have been intentionally moved to be back in this direct alignment with the 3 belt stars of Orion, so that those 3 pyramids will once again align directly with the 3 belt stars of Orion.
And if I could just expand on Orion, of course, we know that the Orion constellation is also associated with the reptilians, that this is one of their strongholds in the universe. So there's a light side and a dark side. Sometimes they're even called the Orion Empire that has spread out across our solar system. But the reptilians aren't even from our universe. They're from another universe. And they come here as a conquering race. And they have been here for, my understanding, 7,700 years. So they weren't there during the time of the building of the Great Pyramids and the blossoming of the Osirian Empire. But there was a certain period where we were very vulnerable, and they found an opportunity to get in here, and now they have affected our consciousness and our awareness. But it seems to be that it's kind of this love-hate relationship with Orion, that one, we know that this is the center point where they're operating out of, but 2, maybe a source in an older age where perhaps some human-like entities once resided and came from as well. And perhaps those were the plans of the original building. And like I said, the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx should be dated more in the tens of thousands of years old.
Yes.
And therefore, at that time, there was not the reptilian influence that there was. And perhaps they were a little optimistic that maybe we could get Orion back. I don't think that's been the case, that this is still quite a stronghold for this group as they stretch out in our universe to conquer planets that are vulnerable. And Earth has been vulnerable. And keep in mind that the reptilians and the Greys, these malevolent service to self ETs, have 4th dimensional abilities. So they have an incredible advantage over us. We really can't compete. It's almost like a mom and pop store trying to stay afloat when the new Walmart opens down the street, who has prices half of theirs, and they can't get their supply that cheap. It's in the same vein that we can't compete with entities of a 4th dimensional nature. One, because we haven't been taught that. We haven't been trained to become multidimensional, and we have that ability if only we were to learn it. And if we were to learn it, we may even have the possibility with the ascension to just jump the 4th dimension and go right to the 5th. And then this is why there is such a battle going on, invisible battle, silent wars with quiet weapons, to keep the human race suppressed and keep us here locked in this hard third-dimensional reality. Because if we were to jump over the fourth and into the fifth, then we would have an advantage over them. And they can't have it because, of course, they would lose this whole solar system, not only Earth, but everything around us. And this is like a gateway point on the outer ring of the Milky Way galaxy to jump to other galaxies within the greater universe.
That explains so much. So many of us talk about moving into 5D.
Yeah.
As if this 4D isn't even necessary. It's just a brief transition, you know, from 3D straight into 5D. So.
And I always thought we should try to go into 4D, but what I understand through esoteric studies, that this is the realm of all the spirits, and some of them are quite malevolent. That's what you get with like exorcisms and demonic possessions. Those are all the entities that exist in the fourth. So maybe our best interest to just skip that and go right into the fifth, and then we enter into a density where the primary motivation and emotion is love. And if you can enhance that in yourself, if you can really embody it, you're in a very good position to make that jump. If you're still fighting your fights and living in an anger state or a state of fear, you may get left behind. So it's a very important point to try to embrace your heart chakra, open yourself up, become in service to others, become compassionate for others, even total strangers. We're all in this together. And all we have to do is empower the human race to just ask for our abilities to rule this surface world and empower ourselves. But they keep us so divided all the time, we can't quite do that. So we have to just realize what we've been under for so long, the spell we've been under, and bring ourselves together. And so everything that's happening is always to keep us divided, keep us at war, keep us thinking we're separate. We're not. We're all one. And as soon as we know that, we become empowered. And then I think we can make that great leap, which has been our destiny for so long.
So beautifully expressed. Hey, we have our Golden Age Oracle, Magen Martinez, calling in. Megan, would you like to have some psychic insight to add to our lively conversation today?
Sure.
So, Brad was just talking about we can just skip that fourth dimension and move right into the fifth. What insight do you have to share with us about that?
Well, I think it's interesting that you brought that up because a lot of people do talk about this. And so where are we getting this information from? We're kind of all connected into this collective consciousness, and it's telling us that we have this capability. And one of the interesting things that the council shared with me is that once we move into a fifth dimensional reality, that people, humans, like right now in our third dimensional reality, there are some of us outlying humans that can access fourth and fifth dimensional abilities. When we move into the fifth dimension, we can then access sixth and seventh dimensional abilities.
Right.
And so moving into that fifth dimension would really make us unstoppable.
That's right. And would prevent us, thank you caller for that great insight. By jumping into the fifth dimension, then we are on the ascension path to really carry this on to become truly interdimensional beings. This might be a very difficult concept for most people to grasp, but once you understand that this is the path of evolution for the human race, what potential we have is so enormous, and that's part of the reason they keep us divided. They do not want us to know this potential we have to jump the fourth dimension and then move on from there. So great call, caller. Great question.
While we still have her on the line, I would love for you guys to engage in a conversation about timelines. When I was interviewing Mary Rodwell the other day, she was telling me that the fifth dimensional expression of Mother Earth already exists, that 5D Mother Earth already exists, and she's just waiting for us. So then we got into timelines and how we've tried this a few times before, but this time we have like a 95% chance of making it. So can you tell us some insight around timelines?
Sure. Well, there have been several timelines, up to 7, I understand, through Matthew and Hopetep. We were just talking about that. Now it's kind of really primarily 2. There is timeline 1, which is the highest chance for success. You said 95% that Mary said, and I'm very happy to hear that. Just a few years ago, it was only 70%. So that means we're moving even closer and closer to making this a reality. And timeline 1 is basically the promise of the Golden Age. That is reaching this utopia state where free energy technology will be released. We don't have to pollute anymore. We can use that to create, say, desalinization plants using free energy. All the ocean water become fresh water. We can turn this right back into the garden planet that it's always meant to be. And then giving children all the benefit of all the knowledge we've accumulated up till then. This is my understanding of how Pleiadian society and the higher benevolent service to other societies work. There are no more secrets. Nobody keeps anything from anyone, and you just build upon what you already know. So if you can imagine how we have a secret space program up there, but we still have Stone Age primitive people living in the Amazon. So the human race is really at this great dichotomy of differences among ourselves. But we're all Homo sapien. We're all of the same kind, and we can all tap into this. So timeline 2 is what they've been pushing so very, very hard to get this new world order set up. And my understanding through the author Leo Lion-Zagami, who I have the great privilege of being his publisher in English, his book Confessions of an Illuminati Volume 2 says they have to get it all done by 2020. And many things have not happened to do that. And right now, towards the end of 2017, they're in a very desperate situation. And we know what happens when animals get cornered. They become very desperate. And so the cabal is now all in. They're doing this false flags. They're creating this strategy of tension, which comes out of Operation Gladio, to get people in a fearful state, once again to divide us, and to prevent us from reaching timeline 1. But we're so close to being there. We're just waiting for that day of the mass arrests. And when that happens, I think it'll be a glorious day for humanity, when they all start getting rounded up, and it'll probably be a holiday in the future. The day that we finally got over this roadblock. And that's quite only what it is. It's just a roadblock, because this is going to go on. Humanity has such great potential. We just have to get over this one block, and then we are just free to explode, and with the potential of some of us actually becoming fifth dimensional beings, if we're prepared now. And it's never too late to begin your ascension process and really just try to love every day. Be quick to smile or crack a joke or be generous with what you have. That's what it's all about. And each one of us can make that decision. Each one of us has the opportunity to be charitable, compassionate, and wise in our daily decisions. And when many people get frustrated and think, well, what can I possibly do? There's a lot you can do. And those are the 3 things that the Buddhists say each individual should try to encompass: wisdom, charity, and compassion in your daily lives.
Beautiful. Yes, and so many of us on this planet at this time have really dedicated our lives to the ascension. Really dedicated ourselves with events, books, shows that will help to herald humanity into the ascension. And then all of these new children that are coming in at this time are really well equipped to be our guides and leaders moving forward as they come in with these very special gifts as really higher dimensional beings. Megan, do you have some insight you'd like to share with us around these timelines?
Absolutely. What you said was beautiful and totally on point, especially with what the galactics have been sharing with me. And so we have these 7 trans-dimensional realities, and they've been collapsing into each other as we eliminate these possible future outcomes. And we are attempting. There was a time where 2 timelines were going to be allowed to exist, and we decided to optimize our opportunity here and braid that into one timeline where we have a balance between the heart and the mind consciousness and are able to evolve as a people on this planet. And so the funny thing is that I believe, based on what the Galactics have told me, is that timeline 2 that you're referring to doesn't exist anymore. And I have seen it eliminated. So last year I had visions of something similar to an I Am America map, where we saw these massive catastrophic events that wiped out a large portion of our population, and those timelines have been eliminated by our galactic friends. And so, like you said, they've done many things to try and take us out. If anybody remembers them talking about the big one last year, which is them setting off the fault line outside of California to take out the western United States.
Mm-hmm.
That was thwarted by our galactic friends. They also stopped them from setting off Yellowstone.
Yep.
And also these hurricanes and earthquakes that are happening now are geoengineered.
Yep.
They are man-made, and they were in an attempt to wipe out the East Coast. And those have been slowed down by our galactic friends. Now, they said they weren't able to stop them completely, but they were able to minimize the damage. And so what the opposition doesn't really truly understand is that game's already over. We won. We always were going to win.
Yeah. But again, they're cornered animals, and they're getting into a desperate state. And they no longer have their fourth dimensional backup, because many of the entities who are assisting them over millennia are either disabled or incapacitated to the point where they're very exposed, because now they stand on their own. And rather having a fourth dimensional entity shadowing them, and that's what it's always been about. If you want to gain power, the making a pact with the devil is a very real thing. The devil beings, I akin it to reptilians in the conclusion of future esoteric, same with Lucifer and Satan. They don't have that fourth dimensional backup anymore. So those people that made that pact with the devil, that had been shadowed in the fourth dimension to make all those things happen, fame, fortune, power, control, those things are falling aside. And guess what? They're just humans like us now. But they still have the structure in place. And this is why this is still a very dangerous time. And I love your optimism, caller. And I want to believe that we are very much on the cusp of a great breakthrough for humanity. But I would have to quote James Gilliland from the ESETI Ranch, and we saw today in the skies over Sedona, they're still spraying us. They're still chemtrailing the skies, and as you mentioned, they're attempting to do all these enhancing hurricanes for maximum destruction. But you're right, they do seem to not quite have the potency that they could. And I do know what you're saying about the West Coast. I live in San Francisco. There have been tremors, and volcanoes showing little signs that they might erupt, but it's just not happening. Same with Yellowstone. Last summer, there were signs that they were triggering it, and there were actually frequency signatures around Yellowstone showing that they were trying to set this off. Because if Yellowstone caldera blows, then all of North America is going to be in total chaos. They want us to be in chaos, because then they can hide again. Then they can go into their underground bases and wait it out, let us fight each other over resources, whatever. Again, we'd be in a fearful state. We'd be in a very desperate state. And you can't talk about these things when you don't even know where your next meal's coming from. You're just trying to fight for survival. That's where they're trying to push us, but I don't think it's going to happen. However, they're still doing their shenanigans. And like James Gilliland says, as long as they're spraying, there is the apparatus still in place to do what they want to do. Now, I've noticed that the chemtrails have dropped off quite a bit ever since the election. It does seem that there are white hats in the government that are trying to advance this, but as we all know, the government is such a massive bureaucracy, and there's still these compartmentalized parts of it that continue some of their programs that are not in benefit of humanity. But I love your optimism, and I think the light will prevail, and those people who have done the harm, they're going to have some heavy karma to pay. But that's their deal. Our deal is to help people in the ascension process, and that will be our karma. And I think it'll be good karma.
Absolutely. And the more of us who get on board with heralding in the ascension by doing just what Brad said, really just, random acts of kindness, going out every day and shining your light as bright as you can on your brothers and sisters with compassion and love, that's really our best weapon. And I also believe, light always overcomes the darkness, and ultimately love prevails. So beautiful, beautiful perspectives, Brad. I love how you really emphasize, that humans can really make a difference just by being the best version of their highest self.
It really does matter. And when people think that they're just so insignificant, like a grain of sand in the great beaches of the planet, well, just remember, every star shines a light. No matter how far away it is, you can still see that light. And just shine as bright as you can. Do the best you can. Just try to remain positive through these very trying times. It shouldn't be that much longer to go. But just be the best person you can be, and I think it's all going to work out.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful thought to end with. So thank you so much for joining us for this very special episode of Lighten Up. Thank you so much, Brad. It's always such a pleasure to spend time with you and get your amazing insight.
Oh, always a pleasure to see you again, Suzanne. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. His books are the Sacred Places series and then also his Esoteric series. Brad, do you want to shout out your website so people can check you out?
Sure. If you wanted to learn more about me, it's bradolsen.com, Olsen. cccpublishing.com is my website, my publishing business. You can read all of our books online. If you order through the website, you can get signed copies from me, my books. I also have a YouTube channel called Esoteric Series, and I have a radio show every Wednesday called the Esoteric Circle on Revolution Radio and Late Night in the Midlands from 3 to 6 Pacific time every Wednesday. So come and have a listen, learn more about these subjects, and let's do this thing.
Let's do this. And remember, live well, love life.
And now, back to our Golden Age Oracle, Magen Martinez.
Hello,
All right.
Megan.
Hi guys, it's great to be back with you. I'm very excited about all the stuff you've been talking about.
Awesome. So glad to have you.
Yes, we're delighted that you're here, my dear. And I know that you bring a lot of information and wisdom in from the Elohim, and we talked about that during the last show. Can you tell us what kind of updates you may have for us or information relative to our topics today?
One interesting thing that was shared with me by the Elohim about a year ago was about the significance of the cusps leading up to this Golden Gate. So they do speak to me about the Golden Gate and what it is in the portal to ascension, essentially. And each one of these cusps leading up to it is like a dropping of a veil where we get a little bit closer to full enlightenment. So they've also given me revelations that kind of pertain to the work that we're doing behind the scenes. It represents the lifting of a veil, and it's also been associated with the revealing of a goddess on every one that drops, which I found very fascinating. So when you talked about the two becoming one and how the serpent is connected with the goddess, a part of this ascension that we're going through is the rise of the divine feminine. And so the imagery of the snake and the serpent has been kind of demonized in our recent history. And in that demonizing of that, it's also been associated with the goddess, and she's been removed from a lot of the religious texts. And what does that mean for us? Well, the problem with this is that the goddess represents our emotional body. And when we're disconnected from our emotional body, we can't master it. We can't master anything. We're out of balance, and the universe demands balance. So in our march to ascension, we have to be returned to our whole. The two have to become one. And the goddess has to be in her rightful place next to God.
Oh yeah, you know what? The 722 was the other one I was thinking of with the Feast of Mary Magdalene. Look how they've, portrayed her. And the other thing the church was doing was suppressing and cutting our sexuality, off. We should not tune into that. We shouldn't have the Kundalini rise. So I forgot that part that you'd mentioned before pertaining to the unveiling of the wisdom around the goddess.
Yeah, absolutely. She's part of us. She's part of our essence and our being. And the chakra system represents those root elements and the kundalini and the expressing of that energy, and that being in balance with our higher chakras is absolutely essentially important to our ascension. We can't get there without having all of those things in line. And so it was a convenient way to disconnect us from that information to, you see the goddess represented as oftentimes one of the aspects of the goddess is sexuality, right? And she's powerful. She's a powerful, sexy woman. And that is part of, and demonizing those traits about feminism has kind of disconnected all of us from connecting with that in our own beings. And so there's been an attempt to shut us down, and why is that? I find that really fascinating. Why did they do that? Well, it's to disempower us. And so we should be claiming those aspects of ourselves and rejoining them so that we can be in that balance that the universe is demanding from us, so that we can grow.
It certainly is the rise of the feminine energy right now, and I think it's so interesting that the serpent represents that energy as it spirals up our spine and ignites all of those chakras. And oftentimes we hear, especially in theosophy, that we have 7 chakras plus 5 secret chakras, and then ultimately 13th is the gateway. But it's really the serpent, life force, goddess energy spiraling up the spine.
Yeah, we're familiar with the serpent around the staff, and you see that with the caduceus symbol, and it's been represented. Asclepius has been represented by the same thing, but some people don't know that it's also a representation of Asherah, and it was referred to as the Asherah pole. And so the story goes that she, this was one of the poles that leaned against the temple, and she picked up the pole, and she enticed the snake to climb up the pole. And with that pole, she healed all the children of Jerusalem.
These were also called the high places, and they shut that down. I forgot exactly when. But yeah, because Moses erected a serpent in the desert also. And there's a lot of correlation to these high places, these temples.
It's funny, when you were talking about the twins earlier, it's also a little known fact that for every expression of God that we have through ancient mythology, there is a counterbalance and an expression in the female goddess. And so you see some of the same stories coming through over and over again when you look through history. And it's important to note because, it's our history. And also, it's important to understand why those things were suppressed.
And these feminine matriarchal eras are all about uniting the masculine and feminine energies. So it's about the masculine expressing their feminine energies and the feminine expressing their masculine energies, and it's all about unity consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I also think another interesting aspect of that is there's a term that you introduced in your first book, Wake Up, Suzanne, called practical spirituality. And I see this in many different forms, and one of them being, how do we apply these spiritual concepts to our 3D world? And I see that happening right now. We have this huge feminist uprising. And so I believe that that's the 3D representation of the rising of the divine feminine. We also have a very deep and heated conversation going on about racism that's been it's been intertwined with our culture for a very, very long time, since the beginning of this country, and it's a long overdue conversation. But what I think it represents also is the equality and unity consciousness. And so it's interesting to see these spiritual concepts being applied to our world and see the progress happening real time.
Yes, so then the question does become, how do we unite and balance the masculine and feminine energies? And so some of these exercises in practical spirituality are really all about merging the ego mind with the spiritual heart. And so you're able to observe when your ego is taking over and you have the opportunity to tap the ego on the shoulder and say, you know, my higher self is going to be driving this bus now. So it's really like the ego and the spirit working together to take you on this ascension journey.
Absolutely, and the wisdom of the heart, allowing that merger to occur. Some people talk about it as the high heart, but really it's when you reach this balanced place, this equipoise, everything has its rightful place and its rightful time. So the ego is a tool, and it should be used when it's necessary to assert yourself. But, you know, you don't need to necessarily assert yourself at the dinner table.
I like the analogy of the higher self will be driving the bus now, because it really feels to me like you kind of want your higher self in the driver's seat, but you certainly want your ego in the passenger seat as well, right? So that all that you're expressing through your mind is also heart-centered. So just a little plug here. We're really wanting people to tune into our YouTube channel, and we have a free ebook called Merge that's all about merging your ego and spirit. When you come and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Suzanne Ross is the name, but we'll give you the bit.ly link. So Megan, thank you so much for bringing all of that out about the goddess life force energy.
I had a question for her.
Okay.
She's talked about the council and the sky crew moving the planet. And recently she shared with me that they also moved it to help optimize the Golden Gate. Maybe she could tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, there's multiple reasons why they physically shifted our planet. One of the reasons being that we were in the direct path of an asteroid that was going to hit us. I don't know if it's an asteroid or a comet. I always get those confused. Anyways, it was going to hit us, and it would cause massive catastrophe on the planet. So they moved us out of the way of that. Another element of that is, you know, a lot of people talk about this planet X or planet Nibiru, and its gravitational pull, which causes it's theorized that this causes our pole shift that happens every 26,000 or 13,000 years. And so in order to move us out of that gravitational pull, to protect the 7.5 billion people that are living on our planet, because 90% of us live on the coastlines and would be gone if that were to happen, was another motivating factor for this. But also this gate, so we're on this timeline, right? And it's these numbers are pretty much set in stone, but we're in this like window of optimization. And it's something that you guys talked about in both of your books about the correlation to the Belt of Orion and the importance of that. So one of the things that they shared with me recently, and this is a new revelation that they just shared, was that this was another reason for moving us, was so that we remained in alignment with that beltway. And
the photon beam. Mm-hmm.
And the photon beam, and stayed connected and optimized our ability to pass through the Golden Gate. So we didn't miss our opportunity, because we've kind of circled around it a few times in the last 3 years, and it's taken these last 3 years of things that are going on behind the scenes and the raising of the frequency of humanity's consciousness for us to optimize and cross through the threshold. And another interesting point that I'd like to make, and this is in the overall just belief and hope that we are really making it, is that we have arrived. We've arrived at our destination. So we're here, and I think everybody's kind of feeling this shifting happening. As you've mentioned the ascension symptoms, but this overall kind of feeling of just knowing that we're okay, and that weight lifting off your shoulders, and knowing that no matter what happens, no matter what crazy thing we see in the news, that as a whole, we are okay. So we've arrived at our destination, and this next month is really just a slow march across the threshold of the Golden Gate and entering into this new Golden Age.
By the way, some evidence of what she said pertaining to that we have moved. I'm a stargazer, and I used to watch Venus all the time, and Venus has not been doing what it normally does. In fact, even some indigenous tribes, people have noticed that Venus is out at night and staying out for quite a while. And that's not, it used to be called a morning star So, you didn't see it for that long. It didn't just hover around.
Well, it's just so comforting to know that these galactic councils are doing everything that they can to save the species, to upgrade the species, to co-create with us during this ascension process, and to really be our guides and leaders on this journey.
Yeah, enable us an opportunity to go through this process. I mean, the scales are shifting. The amount of people that are waking up, it would be a shame to have so many people that are so close not be able to access their higher consciousness and ascend through the portal.
I'd like to also just point out that we do have our ascended masters and our family up there helping us through this difficult period, but we're doing it. Humanity is doing it. The people down here on the ground are making it happen. So they're guiding us, and they're doing as much as they can in intervention to assure our survival. But it's really the consciousness in every person on this planet shifting that's making this a reality.
Absolutely. It's up to us to shift this consciousness. And so many people feel as if they have actually been sent here at this time to be the guides and the leaders right here with our boots on the ground. And that's what the three of us have dedicated our lives to as well, heralding in the Golden Age of Enlightenment and moving into this ascension. And together we can.
Indeed, and waking up to our multidimensional selves, because we are on multiple levels simultaneously, in multiple timelines simultaneously, and the Ascended Masters are walking amongst us, as are other dimensional beings, whatever you want to call extra, other dimensional beings. They are with us. They're helping us on the ground, as above, so below.
That sounds like an excellent topic for our next show, accessing your multidimensional selves, and I would love to expand on that. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Megan, for calling in.
Thanks for having me.
See you next week.
Awesome.
And thank you. And remember, live well, love life. We are so excited to announce two phenomenal events that we will be hosting in November and December right here in the Red Rock Paradise of Sedona. On 11/22, the Golden Gate opens, and we host an event at the Sedona Community Center to celebrate this auspicious time. We will have Golden Age activations, and we will unveil sacred wisdom, lost keys, and divine codes to open the Ascension Portal. Our second event, taking place December 9th and 10th, is the Cosmic Wave, where we will be exploring the cosmic wave of consciousness, streaming in from our brothers and sisters in support of the awakening and ascension of humanity. The keynote speaker for this event is author and investigative journalist Brad Olsen, also starring on Ancient Aliens to Reveal, his esoteric series. Our special musical guests are Jay Brave and Shyla Ray, premiering their inspirational song, Sacred. We will also be featuring many authors and speakers who will be sharing their phenomenal insight, including Tom Dongo, Light Star, Stands with Bear, Adana, Tolek, Nancy Safford, Deborah Thunderbeat, Shakina Rose, Joseph P. Anthony, and the Golden Age Oracle herself, Magen Martinez. This will be two all-day events taking place at the Sedona Community Center. Please visit www.theawakeningcenters.org and click on fundraising activities
to find out all of the exciting details about these two phenomenal events. We hope to see you there.
While everything is accelerating, it is still a good idea to get yourself your 7th seal activator. This ascension tool will increase your frequency and work with you in a very specific way, as the divine intelligence of this device knows what to do within your system. If you've never had a Kundalini activation, prepare yourself. If you've already been on your journey and your heart has already been awakened, or your third eye, this energy will proceed to your crown and expand you into higher levels of awareness. Go to my website, www.7sealcodes.com, to find out more. You can also search for the 7 Seal Activator in eBay. For only $11, you can accelerate your ascension process.